All right, let's get into chapter number 2 now of composition through landscape. So basically the first chapter we spoke about this overlying or underlying compositional shape of light and shadow, and then you're going to incorporate tone. And that was the first way that you want to kind of plan out your scene on your blank white sheet of paper with light and shadow. Now, another tool that I use all the time, and this really helps me, and this is just our first scene. We're going to do 3 or 4 scenes, so I'll give you different ideas in each scene, but I'm giving you 4 basic ones for this, and these are the ones that I've been using for many, many years, pretty much my whole artistic career with my illustration jobs. Now, this is very important to me, at least, and what I like to call it is the very simple grid. So basically, you know, let's say we've got this rectangle, you cut it in half vertically, and then you cut that in half horizontally. So once you've done that, you take this little rectangle, you cut it in half, and then you cut it in half horizontally. This little rectangle, cut it in half. So I'm kind of making this a little bit more complicated than what it is, but basically you've got 4 equally shaped rectangles going across. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you've got 4 equally shaped rectangles going down your image. So basically, if you cut this thing in half with a diagonal, you go diagonal, basically here's the middle of my image. So basically, I put this grid on every single drawing that I do. Now, when I first learned about this grid, it was more about like a transfer tool. So if I did this little drawing and say this drawing was like 5 inches by 4 inches, and I wanted to make it 5 feet by 4 feet, I would use the grid and I would make it in proportion. And if I was going to do it on a big canvas, I would draw the same proportions, and I'd use the grid to transfer my drawing and to retain its proportions. That's fine, but now how I'm asking you to use the grid is a lot of this depends on your style as well. Do you want a symmetrical composition, symmetrical meaning balanced, or do you want an asymmetrical composition, a composition meaning unbalanced? And using this simple grid, the theory is, well, or at least my theory is that your most important elements, let me just draw these little circles here, your most important elements should be in these 4 central squares, or rectangles, I meant to say, if you want your composition to be a little bit more on the balanced side. Okay, I always like to put my primary character and my secondary characters, at least their faces, in one of these 4 rectangles in the center of my image. Now, let's say you're the type of person who hates, calm, balanced compositions. This is a very calm, balanced composition. Well, then you do the opposite of that. So you don't put anything of importance inside these 4 central rectangles. You put them on the outside. You maybe even take this character here that's in your image, touching these 2 inside rectangles, and you crop her and you kind of put her on the outside of your drawing. So this is very, very important that you just use this grid for this one simple reason. You keep your most important things in the 4 central square rectangles. Okay, I don't know why I keep calling them squares, because they're not, but so basically, you put this grid on. All these rectangles are going to be very equal. It's just constantly cutting in half, cutting in half, cutting in half, cutting in half. And so this is perfect. I mean, she could be moved in a little bit more to these 2, but she's basically touching this inside rectangle, so that's going to work for me. All right. Now, the other thing that I'm going to change slightly, not much from my L-shaped composition that this grayscale is covering, is I really want to pull from the 1-point perspective the lines. So rather than my L-shaped thing being purely horizontal, and this is tilted a little bit, but this line being purely horizontal in my compositional shape in the previous chapter, I'm going to tilt it, and I'm really going to pull off the inspiration of this photo, of the perspective of this cast shadow, and also the perspective of this cast shadow, and the perspective of the barn. All right, now with that said, how am I going to use my perspective? Pretty much I'm pulling back I'm pulling the top of the barn down where the roof of the barn is, and now I'm going to pull this cast shadow going across. So rather than have my compositional shape, like I said, be so horizontal, I'm just going to pull from the perspective. Now, the perspective, I'm going to make like a little opening over here in the back of my landscape. An opening through the trees where maybe you're going to see some distant mountains or something like that. And that will help to tell the story, whatever story that you want to show in this composition. I'm really not trying to show any major story. It's just more of like a beautiful scene, and I'm trying to show more of like a background, some kind of opening in the fields, in the scene going back into a field, or perhaps like some rolling hills back there. And the main reason why I'm doing that is just to create a little bit of depth in the image so it's not so flat. I don't think it's flat because we already have some overlap. So once again, before we get into the drawing aspects of it, because I'm doing a lot of talking, I'm probably going to talk or start to draw in the next chapter, but this is very, very important. Just think about what is the style of your images that you create. Are you a comic book artist and you do these crazy, 3-point perspective scenes, you do foreshortened scenes? Maybe if you're doing like a Spider-Man comic book, his head would be shoved over here in the corner. And that's going to be an asymmetrical composition. There's going to be nothing balanced about that at all. For me, and all the book covers that I've done over the years are usually very calm scenes, so I like to go with my compositions being a little bit more balanced. Therefore, I use these 4 central rectangles to put my main character, and I probably will break down a couple of the paintings that I've done to show you my logic when working with more than one character. Like I said, you can have one character a little bit bigger here, and a secondary character a little bit smaller in this rectangle. All right, so let's move on now to chapter number 3, and let me just kind of draw this out for you.